At first light on December 29, 1890, the wind skims Wounded Knee Creek, South Dakota. A winter band of Mini-Kunju Lakota, led by Spotted Elk, waits under Army escort. Frost grips the tipis. 4 field guns sit on the ridge. Companies of the 7th Cavalry form a ring around the camp. An interpreter repeats that weapons must be surrendered before an escort to Pine Ridge. Spotted Elk is ill on a travois. Elders speak of the road south after Sitting Bull's death. Families cluster near wagons while children watch the soldiers. Officials have branded the ghost dance a threat. For the people here, it is a prayer of return. Hope and fear share the same circle. The Army's aim is disarm and transfer. The Lakota aim is survival and safe passage. Everyone is short on warmth, food, and trust. Our question is clear. What chain of policy rumor and winter pressure brought these families and these companies to this frozen draw? And why would a search for rifles become a national reckoning that endures? Orders ripple down the cavalry line. Men shift positions and stack carbines. The interpreter raises his hands to steady the camp. Snow begins again. A young man holds a prized rifle beneath his blanket as a sergeant reaches for it. The day balances for a breath between restraint and fire. Winter 1890 opens with tight rations on the northern plains. Buffalo are gone. Agency stores at Standing Rock and Pine Ridge run thin. Hunger sharpens every order. Policy pressure deepens. The Dawes Act of 1887 breaks communal lands into allotments. Surplus acres open to settlers and rail spurs. Families lose range and water. Administrative seams widen. Interior agencies manage daily life and schools. Army districts answer for peace and movement. Orders cross slowly between desks in Chicago and field posts on the plains. In 1889, a new religious current rises from Nevada. People call it the Ghost Dance. It promises renewal and the return of buffalo. Songs and circles spread to Lakota camps. Agents read the dance as rebellion. Dancers read it as prayer. Reports from Standing Rock and Pine Ridge ask for troops. Telegraphs carry fear faster than horses can carry facts. At Standing Rock in early December 1890, Indian police receive an arrest order for Sitting Bull. Before dawn on December 15, a clash at his house turns deadly. Sitting Bull falls. Riders carry the news south. The death breaks confidence. Hunkpapa families move toward safety with relatives. Mini-Kunju under Spotted Elk, already sick, turn toward Pine Ridge. Snow squalls slow the trail. General Nelson A. Miles commands the Division of the Missouri from Chicago. He directs field officers to contain the movement and disarm camps. His intent is order without a general war. At Pine Ridge, Agent Daniel Royer sends alarmed wires asking for many troops. He writes that the situation is beyond his control. Soldiers concentrate at Rushville and then push onto the reservation roads. The 7th Cavalry under Colonel James W. Forsyth rides from Nebraska posts. Major Samuel M. Whitside leads the forward elements. 4 Hotchkiss guns travel with the column for deterrence. Lakota objectives are survival and reunion at the agency. They hope to receive rations and protection after the death of a leader. They carry a few rifles for hunting and for dignity. Army objectives are disarm and transfer. Commanders want the camps counted and moved to agency control. They aim to prevent any march to the Badlands, where terrain favors dispersal. Constraints weigh on both sides. Weather is severe. Ammunition and forage are finite. Interpreters are few. Orders arrive by telegraph out of sync with local conditions. On December 27, scouts report Spotted Elk near Porcupine Creek. Whitside intercepts and directs the band toward Wounded Knee Creek for the night. Spotted Elk rides a travois and coughs through the frost. Forsyth reaches the site at dusk on December 28. He places the 4 guns on the ridge above the encampment. Pickets tighten the ring through the dark. The plan for morning is a full search for weapons and an escort to Pine Ridge Agency. The plan for the band is to endure one more morning and reach shelter. Both plans depend on restraint that the winter air cannot guarantee. Night settles over Wounded Knee Creek. The ring of pickets holds. Fires burn low to save wood. Frost feathers the lodge poles. Before dawn, the wind sharpens. Troopers stamp their feet and check canteen ice. The guns on the ridge sit dark and silent. At first light, an interpreter moves through the lines. He repeats that all arms must be surrendered before the escort to Pine Ridge. The words carry across a camp of families, not a line of fighters. Company sergeants form details to search. A stack is placed for turned-in rifles and knives. Men are told to gather in front of the lodges. Spotted Elk remains on a travois, breathing shallow. A few elders ask that searches be gentle and that blankets not be torn. The request is noted and not fully observed. Women begin to pack kettles and bedding for the march. Children cling to shawls against the drift. Dogs pace under the wagons. A trooper lifts a blanket at the lodge edge and finds a hunting rifle. The man who owned it protests that he has paid for it and needs it to feed his family. The weapon goes to the stack. The ring tightens by small steps. A lieutenant paces the inner arc and cautions men not to fire unless ordered. The caution is sound, but fragile. Signals lag between ridge and line. A courier trudges uphill to confirm the timing of the search. The wind steals words before they travel 30 paces. Some later accounts describe a medicine man calling for courage. Others deny any command to fight. The record is mixed and cannot be settled from the field. Interpreters warn that rough handling will trigger panic. They ask that any man who still has a rifle be allowed to step forward without shame. Patience thins as the morning wears on. A young man holds a prized Winchester under his blanket. He says he bought it dear and will not give it up. Hands reach for the gun. The circle presses in. A scuffle begins at the center where the stack of weapons grows. Bodies close the space where calm words might still work. The ridge guns angle their muzzles slightly. Their crews watch the camp rather than the horizon. A captain frowns at the alignment and says nothing. A warning cry cuts through the cold. For a breath, nothing moves. Then blankets fly back and hands claw for iron and wood. The first crack splits the air like glass. No one agrees after on who fired it. What follows is not a volley, but a tearing open. Philip Wells. Testimony. Wounded Knee. Creek, 1890, 12:29. I heard the cry to look out and saw several young men cast off blankets and brandish guns. A shot came from the midst and the soldiers fired into the Indians. His words place fear and smoke in the same moment. Carbines answer from the ring. Some soldiers fire across each other's fronts. The geometry of the circle turns crossfire into a second enemy. Women seize children and run for the draw. Bullets rake the flats where no cover stands. A tippy cloth shreds and drifts like snow. One cavalry horse bolts and slams a picket line. A gun crew on the ridge pulls a lanyard. The first shell bursts beyond the lodges and showers earth. Inside the press, a trooper swings a rifle. Like a club, a Lakota man falls with his hands still open. Another reaches for a boy, and both are hit. The interpreter waves both arms and shouts to stop firing toward the ravine. Only the nearest men hear him. The wind carries the rest of his plea away. A corporal tries to push his squad outward to widen the ring. They stumble over gear and bodies. Firing becomes scattered and wild. Snow thickens. The camp breaks into fragments heading for the creek bed. The ridge guns adjust and fire again. By mid-morning, the first rush is over. Smoke hangs low. Cries come from the draw and from the flats. The rising incidents have become a field that no order can quickly mend. The ring at Wounded Knee Creek tightens into an improvised order of battle. About 500 troopers of the 7th Cavalry stand by companies around the lodges. 4 Hotchkiss guns hold the ridge above the draw. Inside the ring are roughly 350 Lakota people. Perhaps 120 are men of fighting age. Most others are women, children, and elders. Many men have already surrendered weapons. Company officers try to rebuild control after the first rush of shots. Flags and bugle calls are useless in the wind. Sergeants wave arms and try to dress the line. Gunners on the ridge wait for clear arcs. Smoke on the flats makes range hard to judge. A lieutenant orders crews to hold until the ring steadies. Forsyth sends staff to push the line outward from the tippies. He wants a cordon that shoots outward, not inward. The order arrives in fragments along the arc. Samuel M. Whitside, Field Order, Wounded Knee. Creek, 1890, 12:29. Hold your front and cease fire across the camp. Push the line outward by files. The words reach some squads and miss others in the noise. On the south edge, women and children run for the ravine. A few troopers shift to screen the draw. Others keep firing at figures they cannot clearly see. A detail of soldiers moves to the wagons to cut traces and keep horses from bolting through the line. Several animals already break free and add to the chaos. One Hotchkiss crew misreads a hand signal and fires over the lodges. The shell bursts beyond the far tippies and sends earth into the air. The next round lands closer to the draw. The interpreter pleads again to stop firing toward the ravine. Some men lower barrels, others do not hear. The sound of the guns drowns single voices. A knot of Lakota men attempts a breakout toward the low ground beyond the creek. They use smoke and snow as cover. Several fall in the first 50 yards. On the north flank, a corporal pulls his squad back 10 paces to open space between files. Crossfire drops. The shift saves lives at his front and costs ground. Spotted Elk lies on the travois through it all. A relative tries to pull the travois toward the wagons. The path is open for a moment and then closes as troopers shift position. A captain orders men to collect the scattered children who are close enough to reach. Two privates escort a small group toward the picket line and then drop flat as shots snap over them. Lakota non-combatants reach the ravine in groups and slide along the frozen bed. Snow carries them forward a little faster than feet would. Troopers debate whether to fire into the cut. James W. Forsyth. After-action note. Wounded Knee Creek, 1890, 12:29. Heavy confusion and intermingling of men, women, and children made deliberate fire impossible. Friendly losses caused by crossing lines. The note will later sit in an inquiry file. On the ridge, a gun captain reports low ammunition. Mules bring another chest up the slope. The climb is slow and slick with ice. A squad pushes into the lodges to pull down blankets and check for wounded. One trooper kicks a cooking kettle aside and finds two boys under a heavy robe. He waves them toward the pickets. Stories later claim a coordinated ambush from inside the lodges. Records from the morning show fragments and panic rather than plan. The dispute remains a point of argument in later years. On the open flat, a Lakota man drops his rifle and raises both hands. A private gestures him past and turns to pull another trooper to cover. The man runs toward the ravine and disappears in smoke. A cluster of soldiers fires at movement near a wagon and hits the wheel. Splinters fly. A woman cries out and crawls under the axle with a child pressed tight. On the west side, a junior officer finally halts his file and orders fire only on targets moving away from the draw. The file holds. Casualties along his sector fall. The wind shifts and clears the flats for a minute. Gunners on the ridge see the ravine mouth and set fuses short. A captain on the line shouts to stand fast and not to call for more shells. Medical orderlies move in pairs with blankets as stretchers. They bandage where they can and drag men to the lee of a wagon. One orderly works on a soldier hit by his own side. A cluster of Lakota women circles back under smoke to pull an elder from the snow. A trooper sees the movement and lowers his rifle. He waves them on with his free hand. By late morning, the gun crews go quiet. The line stops advancing. A few shots still crack from the creek bed where individuals trade fire behind cut banks. Reports begin to tally. Troop leaders note dead and wounded and cartridges expended. The numbers look heavy on both sides. The faces look heavier. A burial detail is ordered for later in the day if the wind drops. For now, bodies freeze where they lie. Blankets drift with snow over still forms. Rumor races the length of the cordon that an organized war party is near. Scouts ride a shallow circle and find empty snow. The fear continues even without a target. A captain argues to pull the line back 50 yards and set a true perimeter. The ground will show fewer bodies to the men and take heat from the scene. The suggestion is taken in part. By midday, the field is under military control. Small knots of survivors remain in the cutbanks and beyond the low rise. The army begins to collect prisoners and search the lodges again. An officer drafts a first count of casualties. He writes that many soldiers fell from crossing fire and that the women and children among the dead are numerous. He signs with a shaking hand. In the early afternoon, a hard snow sets in. Visibility drops to a few dozen paces. The army halts movement, except for guards relief and the medical details. By evening, the shooting is done. Fires are lit under the lee of wagons and at the edge of the ring. The guns on the ridge sit cold against the sky. The confrontation has run its course in a few hours. It has left a field of dead and a record that will not agree with itself. It has set a question that the inquiry and the nation will keep asking for generations. The turning point forms before the first shot. The camp is ringed at close distance under 4 ridge guns. Families and soldiers share one narrow space. Spotted Elk lies fevered on a travois. His band has accepted escort to Pine Ridge. The objective is survival through winter and shelter at the agency. Forsyth's objective is disarm and transfer. The regiment stands in a circle that faces inward. The guns on the ridge can reach every yard of the flats. Constraints are hard and simple. Cold fear language, gaps, and haste. Orders move by voice in wind. Interpreters cannot be everywhere at once. The search for weapons starts inside the ring. Men are pressed together near the stack. Blankets are pulled. Tempers rise. A young man clutches a Winchester under his robe. Hands reach for it. In that crush, one crack breaks the morning. The geometry does the rest. Fire spreads along arcs that cross each other. Some soldiers fall to their own side. Non-combatants run toward the draw and into the artillery fan. Within minutes, initiative is gone. No officer can impose calm across a mixed crush of fighters and families. The ridge guns dominate the ground. This is the hinge. Tactics and placement have set an outcome that a single disciplined order cannot easily reverse once fear takes the line. The immediate effect is irreversible loss. Lakota dead and wounded cover the flats and the ravine. Dozens of soldiers fall, many by crossing fire. The human cost can be named in fragments. Spotted Elk dies in the snow. An infant, later called Lost Bird, is carried from a mother's shawl. A burial trench is opened on the hill when the storm eases. Names will be kept in winter counts and ledger art when paper lists fail. Evidence points to setting as much as spark. A tight cordon inside artillery view turns any scuffle into catastrophe. The record shows panic, not plan. Fact and folklore diverge on a medicine man's role at the center. The weight of testimony shows confusion, not a coordinated attack from the lodges. The Army's own notes concede friendly fire. The inquiry will criticize dispositions and still restore the commander. The contradiction will endure. Nelson. A Miles letter, Washington, D.C., 1917. 03. 13 to atone in part for the cruel and unjustifiable massacre of Indian men and innocent women and children at Wounded Knee. The words come from a senior commander. That admission fixes language that later scholars adopt. It narrows the debate to numbers and legal terms, not to whether families were central among the dead. Counterfactual one is procedural. Escort the band to the agency yard first, then conduct searches with interpreters, medical aid, and separation of families from armed men. Counterfactual 2 is spatial. Hold the cordon outside the lodges, remove artillery from direct sight, and keep a clear lane toward the agency to reduce panic. Counterfactual 3 is temporal. Delay the search until midday light with the sick leader treated and the camp warmed, reducing the fear that any rough gesture could trigger a stampede. None of these guarantee peace. All three reduce the chance that one spark creates a killing circle. The inquiry's criticism of placements supports this judgment. Reservation boundaries harden under the pressure of allotment. Survey stakes bite into open range. Leases for grazing and rail spurs follow the section lines. Demography shifts in the next censuses. Families list missing members. School rolls grow as children are pulled into boarding programs far from home. Health records show measles, influenza, and hunger seasons in the early 1890s. Mission journals mention funerals and quick burials through frozen ground. Cultural continuance persists under pressure. Winter counts add a circle for the year the people were killed at Wounded Knee. Ledger artists sketch guns on the ridge and figures in the snow. Ceremony adapts to surveillance. Songs are kept quiet. Language threads run through kitchens and camps. Grandparents teach words with the door closed. In newspapers, the framing splits. Some editors praise suppression of an uprising, others print letters that call it murder. The divide becomes part of the national record. By 1930, a stone marks the mass grave on the rise above the creek. Relatives bring offerings. Travelers write of wind and a silence that feels deliberate. In 1973, the place named Wounded Knee is occupied during a wider protest over local government and treaty enforcement. Federal agents lay siege. Shots are exchanged. 2 people die. The occupation ends under negotiation and exhaustion. It brings national attention back to treaties, police power, and indigenous rights. The name Wounded Knee now holds 2 eras. In 1990, a concurrent resolution of Congress expresses deep regret for the tragedy of 1890 and names a year of reconciliation in South Dakota. Survivors' families speak at commemorations. Debate intensifies over medals issued for actions that day. Tribal nations veterans and members of Congress introduce bills in the new century to rescind the awards. Hearings place survivor accounts beside Army files. Museums and archives mount exhibits using photographs, maps, and eyewitness testimony. The interpretive language shifts toward massacre and away from battle as curators weigh the files. Present day, Oglala Lakota and Miniconjou Lakota communities conduct language classes, trauma-informed health programs, and youth rides that stop at the site. Memory work becomes public practice. At Pine Ridge and Cheyenne River, educators teach primary sources alongside winter counts. Students learn dates and also learn the names kept in families. The site is listed as a National Historic Landmark. Tribal stewardship guides access to the burial ground. Visitors walk the ridge in quiet weather and read the stone. The legal and cultural threads continue. Bills to remove the stain return in new sessions. Commemorations each December gather elders, veterans, students, and singers. The story remains active, not closed. Scholars converge on a first point. Wounded Knee marks the functional end of armed plains conflict and the hinge into an era defined by allotment schools and administrative control. A second point holds that placement and fire patterns make massacre the accurate term. Artillery over a mixed family camp and dense inward lines remove the frame of battle. A third point is continuity. The event's memory links 1890 to 1973 and to present-day debates on medals, commemoration, and redress. Numbers remain contested. Tallies of Lakota dead range by dozens across sources. Soldier deaths are clearer, yet still include uncertainty over friendly fire attribution. Responsibility is debated in levels. Some analysts stress command dispositions and artillery dominance. Others highlight the friction of language panic and winter on the line. The role of any formal resistance from within the lodges is disputed. Most evidence shows confusion, not coordination, yet a few accounts press the ambush claim. The balance favors panic. Legal framing varies. Some writers argue federal liability under policy choices. Others limit judgment to field errors within the accepted laws of war of the period. Memory frameworks differ. Army regimental histories long used battle language. Tribal histories use massacre and name families. Modern museums increasingly follow the latter. Material culture anchors memory. Winter counts ledger drawings and site markers fix names and shapes in place when paper lists fail or disagree. Education reframes understanding. Students now read eyewitnesses alongside orders and learn why the word choice matters for law and for grief. Commemoration practices expand. Runs, rides, and December gatherings make the site active ground for community health language and ceremony. Policy echoes recur. Congressional regret and renewed bills on medals show a nation still adjusting its official language to its archived past. The enduring legacy is twofold. It is a warning about how fear and policy can turn an escort into catastrophe, and it is proof of cultural continuance under pressure. Wounded Knee endures because one winter morning concentrates conquest policy and native survival in a single place, and because communities keep that memory alive in law song and teaching.